Ham. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, very pleasant.
It's a great pleasure to introduce Ambassador Bernal from Mexico. We are, ASEAN Institute, we're very proud to be hosting this very important event, and it's a great honor that you've agreed to present about your country to us. Mexico, I think, for Koreans, for those of us who know history, we remember as a country where one of our first ever immigrants went to in 1905. But we also remember Mexico for football, for me.
Football, yeah, of course.
Always football. But also for your incredible literature, your arts, and of course, history. More recently, we're considered by many experts in foreign affairs as one of the middle powers.
We are, indeed.
We are.
We are.
And so we are now both members of the so-called MICTA.
MICTA, yeah.
So I think our size of our economy is very similar.
About the same.
About the same size. So there are many similarities, but of course there are many things that Koreans don't know about Mexico, and I think this is a real wonderful opportunity for you to present about Mexico. So I very much look forward to listening to your talk today. Thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you. Gracias. 감사합니다.
Mi cascabel con una cinta morada, con una cinta morada. Yo tenía mi cascabel como era de oropel, y como era de oropel, se lo di a mi prenda amada para que juegue con él. Allá por la madrugada, ay como resumba y suena, ay como resumba y suena, resumba y va resumbando, resumba y va resumbando mi cascabel en la arena.
안녕하십니까? Good morning, buenos días. In Spanish, when we want to say hello, we say hola, hola. So yes, it's a very simple word with which you can connect with the Mexican people, with everybody who can speak Spanish. Not only in Mexico, in many countries in Latin America, and also in Spain, Portugal actually, and in a big part of the United States. I think it's important that we are able to say añoaseo sometimes, but we can also say hola in Spanish, in español. As Dr. Ham was telling us, this presentation is aimed at presenting Mexico. Mexico as it is today. Mexico is a country which is a country with a very long history, many traditions, a big culture, rich history. A country that is in many ways connected to the Korean people, but sometimes people in Korea do not know much about what Mexico is, what Mexico means, not only in terms of a country that is located in the central part of the Americas, of the continent in the Americas, but also there is a country that is very much connected with Korea in terms of history, in terms of economy, in terms of culture, in terms of traditions, which are many values together, even if we do it independently in our own society. Along this conversation, you will find out that there are many things that Mexicans and Koreans share. I think this is important to present to the public in Korea, to the viewers, so that we can say how Mexico and Korea can continue working together in building up a strategic alliance for the next century. I will try to explain with some figures, more images, some references to history, what is Mexico today. Today, Mexico is, as a fact, It's the 11th largest country in the world because of the size of the land, the territory. It's about 2 million square kilometers. And because of the population. In Mexico, we live a little bit more than 120 million people, which is important. This makes our country, the 11th largest in the world. And we are the largest Spanish-speaking country. I mean, we are a big nation that speaks Spanish language. And not only we are big in terms of size and population, but also because of the size of our economy. And in this, we are very close to Korea. Mexico today can be seen as the 12th or the 14th largest economy in terms of product. And the same is for Korea. Depends on the year, depends on the statistics, but we are very close together in that. Our total production per year is close to $1.5 trillion American dollars, the same for Korea. And the per capita income in Mexico is around $10,000. This is not the same as Korea, because Korean population is about half of the Mexican population, a little bit less than half. In terms of trade, international trade, the Mexican economy has become the 10th largest trading economy. So this is very important because we depend a lot on our interaction with the rest of the world. We buy, we sell, we produce, not only for the sake of our own domestic needs, but also to provide, to supply goods and services to the rest of the world. And to do that, Mexico has become one of the most open economies in the world in terms of trade. Mexico has negotiated 12 different free trade agreements, starting with NAFTA, which means the North American Free Trade Agreement, that joins together Mexico, the United States, and Canada in a special economic zone. We also have special agreements with the European Union and every country in Europe, not only those belonging to the European Union. We have free trade agreement with Japan, which is very important partner for Mexico. Sorry. And we have special agreements for trade, not only free trade, but also integration schemes with most of the countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. In total, we are reaching out to more than 40 countries in terms of free trade access for them and for us in economic terms. And that is why Mexico, as I said before, has become one of the 10th most important countries, exporting countries in the world. Now, when we speak about the national patrimony in Mexico, the national territory, Mexico is host of 27 cultural sites, so denominated by the UNESCO, the United Nations Organization for Science and Culture. There are 5 denominated natural sites. This means these are especially preserved places in the world. But we have to remember too that in Mexico there are more than 30,000 archaeological sites. And this is because of the big legacy that we keep and we preserve of our ancestors, our previous cultures in Mexico. In terms of heritage in the world, Mexico ranks #1 in the Americas and is #6 in the world. This is very important in terms of our responsibility also to take care of the resources for Mexicans and for humankind in general. Mexico is considered one of the most diverse, biodiverse places in the world. In Mexico, we keep more than 10% of the world's biodiversity. Consider the big world in which we live in, and only one country preserves more than 10% of the total bio life that we can find in the world. We're #2 in ecosystems, #4 in species, several species, different species, because we have identified more than 200,000 different species that are registered as original in Mexico. So this is a very important fact that explains how big, how diverse the country of Mexico is. We have declared more than 175 natural protected areas, and I said before, we are #5 in World Heritage Natural Areas. So this is just to have an idea of the many resources that Mexico has. And Mexico also has presented another aspect of the culture, which is called an intangible, something that you see, you feel but it is difficult to transmit to others, which is food. Mexican cuisine, Mexican food is very important, of course, for Mexicans. This is part of our culture, but it's also very important legacy that Mexicans share with the rest of the world. Mexican cuisine is not only cooking or the combination of ingredients, but it's the way we combine the ingredients, the way we find different natural products that we combine to farm, I mean, in order to cultivate these products, how we make up the culinary techniques, how this represents a family, regional, or historic tradition in our culture, the different customs to present, to cook, to enjoy, which is another part of the culture, and this whole combination of techniques, of traditions, is recognized worldwide as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity. It's not only of Mexicans. This is shared by Mexicans with the rest of the world. And we know that tacos are very well known in Korea. This is very important recipe for the preparation of Mexican food. Is considered our fast food in Mexico. But this is only one small representation of Mexican food. We have thousands of different dishes, many presentations in every region, in every city. When you are in Mexico, you will find the richness of the Mexican food, not only in flavors, in colors, but also in terms of history and traditions. The traditions that we keep come, of course, from our national heritage. And natural heritage is defined by our own history. The history in Mexico has included many chapters, I mean, from the existence of pre-Columbian societies, very developed, highly developed societies that prevailed in central and the Mexico and the eastern coast of Mexico before the Spaniards came. We will count several chapters in history from the ancient civilizations to the colonial times, to the independence time, to the modern times and contemporary times. So it's these are the different, we call them the suns of Mexico. Different suns have illuminated the Mexican people so that we can go from one chapter to another in our own history. In the past, before the Spaniards came and before other civilization existed in the central part of the Americas, the most ancient civilization that we know is called the Olmecs. The Olmec civilization dates back probably 3,500 years back from now. And they were established along the coast of the Gulf of Mexico, which is the central southeastern part of Mexico today, and they even had an influence to some regions in Central America. This civilization had its influence, it ceased to exist, but then a very important civilization that developed from the southern part of Mexico to most of Central America today was the Mayan civilization. The Mayans were there for more than 1,000 years. They were one of the most developed, most advanced civilizations in the ancient world. This is considered the civilization that made many discoveries that prevail even today in terms of science, in terms of natural observation, in terms of astronomical observation, and they were measuring everything, and they were able to invent a calendar, the Mayan calendar. They were able to predict the seasons. They were able to establish their own construction, these pyramids that we see, and that they exist complete, as we see in the picture today. These very exact constructions are not only well-designed and beautiful places, but they are representing a connection with the sky, with astronomical aspects, either with different planets, the moon, the sun, the seasons of the year. So there is these are like temples dedicated to nature and the way the world was created and how life functions. In terms of central Mexico, what is central Mexico today, Mexico City in particular, the most advanced civilization that flourished in that region was the Aztec civilization. The Aztecs rose to power during the 12th and 13th centuries in our era, and remained in control until the arrival of the Spaniards at the end of the 15th century, the early 16th century. One day to keep in mind is that the conquest of Mexico started in the year 1520. In the year 1520, when the Spaniards came, there was a huge civilization. Millions of people already lived and lived well, very well organized in central Mexico. They had their own science, technology, constructions, political organization, military organization. They were able to control different regions around the central part of Mexico. And this was, again, together with the Mayans, one of the richest civilizations that we can find in the ancient world. This was a civilization that was conquered by the Spaniards. This was not destroyed. It's important to keep in mind that during the colonial times in Mexico, the previous civilization and the new civilization were sort of working together, combining together their traditions, their cultures, and out of that working together, that is what mixing together, came out a new people, the new people that we call the Mexican people. Mexican people cannot be defined as Spanish people, neither as Aztec people or other kind of word. We are defined as the Mexican people. That was the collective result of synergies, of combinations of a very own progress and definition that took place along 300 years from the beginning of the conquest of the territory to the moment that Mexicans felt they were willing and able to gain independence as a new country. It's a very important, rich culture, very defined identity as a Mexican nation. Independence, I said before, took place between 1810 and 1821, and that started a century, the 19th century, which was the fight of Mexican people to organize themselves as an independent nation, trying to create a central government to control the territory. Was a very difficult century. It was not only a few years, it was almost 100 years in which the new society, the new nation, was not completely able to control everything because we were learning, and in the learning process there were many fights, domestic fights. We had to face different foreign interventions. The most important one we suffered in a war with the United States. The United States in that time was expanding its territory towards the west, and it was the time of expansion of the colonial and imperial expansion of the United States. So in a fight, in a war with Mexico, Mexico lost. And Mexico lost not only the war, but we lost half of our territory. Before this war, Mexico was about 4 million square kilometers in terms of size. After the war, we were only half, which is the 2 million square kilometers that we keep today. So it was a very, very dramatic fight, a very dramatic loss in terms of the sense of organization, of identity, of commonality in terms of foreign defense. After that, even after that, we were suffering other interventions, people from Europe trying to reclaim their own lands, and new empires in Europe trying to prevail in the domestic affairs in the new Latin American countries. So we also had to face not only the French intervention in 1862, but also we suffered in Mexico the imposition of a ruler coming from Central Europe, from the Austrian Hungarian Empire. We see the picture here of Maximilian, who ruled Mexico for 3 years. After that, after the defeat of the invaders, Mexico was able to again to reestablish a republican style of life, to regain control of the territory, of the government, but it was still, we had something missing, which was the basis for development as an independent country. And the basis for that development took place in the very last part of the 19th century, from 1870 probably to the 1910, under the rule of what was considered at the time a strong ruler, Porfirio Diaz. We can see his picture here, who became a dictator and who was able to organize the country to establish control by ruling under a dictatorship. Dictatorships cannot last much. I mean, they have some positive, many negative aspects, but at the end they cannot last forever. And what toppled this sort of regime was a social revolution that Mexicans fought in the first years of the 20th century, starting in 1910 and finishing in 1917, after more than 1 million Mexicans lost their lives. It was a domestic fight, again, to reorganize control of public life, and it was, again, a dramatic fight that resulted in the establishment of a system, a republican system, a democratic system that we have kept, of course, developing every day, even up to today. The Constitution of Mexico was adopted in 1917. We keep the same Constitution as the basis, but we have worked on many amendments, of course, along the years so that we can continue incorporating the new aspirations, the changes in modern life to the Mexican Constitution. The revolution that finished in 1917 was the basis for Mexico to start a new era of institutionalization. What does it mean? This means that it was important to create the institutions, governmental institutions, social institutions, rules for the coexistence of the people so that we didn't fight against each other, and so that we could establish the basis for education, for the economy to function normally, for the government to work for the people, and for the system to be able to renovate itself by the democratic election of the leaders at national and also at the local levels. This started in 1917. It took again a few years, a few decades, until the 1930s, when we felt that Mexico was mature as an independent country to start different kind of conduction of its domestic affairs. And Mexico started to play a different role, not only as an independent country, but also as an international participant, probably we can say in the 1930s. Before the Second World War, Mexico was already a nation that was respected, was considered a country that was starting to develop itself, and we were able to create these institutions that were the basis for the stability and for development in